endlessly searching for an original sin.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Sweet Pool. Let's continue, shall we? Xenia was a mess. Katani couldn't forget the sound of the boys' laughter echoing through the dining room. He swirled his glass, watching the amber liquid dance. The clink of melting ice was comforting. Once he managed to get Xenia out of the dining room and back into his bedroom, Katani had hopped in the car and headed to the Cerulean Wobbler. Though late, it was a Friday and few patrons were inside when he arrived. The instant he sat down at his usual table, he heaved a heavy sigh. He was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. This was his third scotch on the rocks. He downed the other two as soon as they arrived. He wasn't drunk yet. He had a feeling that wasn't in the cards for tonight. Xenia wasn't the only one weighing on him lately. Konehito was still performing his strange rituals down at the chapel. Katani recalled the animal sacrifice he'd witnessed, the blood dripping onto the altar. He couldn't stop thinking about that chest of documents. Konehito always kept the chapel locked, but the door was made of thin, decaying wood that likely wouldn't survive a strong kick. Still, he didn't want to force his way in if he could avoid it. Katani lowered his glass and took a cigarette out of his pack. There were more customers now, and the counter seats were almost full. The manager had called in a second bartender to keep up with the orders. Katani glanced at him and froze. Tetsuo? There was no mistaking him. Katani still remembered the day Xenia ordered him to rough the kid up. The whole thing had left such a bad taste in his mouth. He wasn't likely to forget it anytime soon. Tetsuo was working the counter with quite efficiency. Was this a part-time gig? Katani couldn't remember seeing him here before, though perhaps he just hadn't noticed. The unlit cigarette still between his lips, Katani watched him work. He carried himself like a natural, like he belonged. As best as Katani could tell, beneath the blue lights, there were no traces of bruising on his face. His injuries must have already healed. Katani had done quite a number on him, so he couldn't help but be a little concerned. He pulled the cigarette from his lips and set it on the table, then took a sip of his watered-down scotch. That was weird. But even the alcohol couldn't burn away the guilt that had taken root in his chest. Around the time Katani was finishing his glass, a ripple of disquiet shattered the peaceful atmosphere. He turned to the door where the man in flashy dress had just entered. Everything about him screamed Yakuza. Katani was surprised to find that he recognized him. It was Aoshima, a man who had served the Okinaga Gumi as a low-ranking street soldier back in Katani's day. As soon as he caught sight of Katani, Aoshima grinned and headed his way. Arriving at Katani's table, he unceremoniously dropped into a chair across from him.
Yo, Kitani! Hisashiburi ja ne ka.
In the gang, Katani had been his senior, but this tone bore none of the deference expected given the previous relationship. Judging from his attire, he must have done well for himself since Katani had left. Katani vaguely recalled rumors that Aoshima had gotten in good with the new boss. So, what was he doing here of all places?
Oi, oi. しばらく見ねえうちにずいぶん老け込んじまったな。イカれた隠居の面倒を見てるだけで、すり減っちまったのか。何の用だ。
Concealing his unease, Katani looked at Aoshima straight in the eyes.
おっと、そう怖い顔すんなよ。今のあんたは極道じゃねえ。俺だって仇の衆にあやつけるほど暇な身じゃねえさ。
He pulled a gaudy lighter from his jacket pocket and lit up. The bar staff must have picked up on his vibes. No one approached to take his order.
あんたと それに国人のおやっさんの暮らし向きが相当に切羽詰まってるって聞いたんでな。どんな様子か見に来たわけよ。
どこからそんな噂が？
It felt like Aoshima was trying to push his buttons. Granted, they weren't exactly living the high life, but they had enough to keep up appearances at least.
噂も何も。あんた知らねえの？おやっさんが組の方に金の無心をしに来たんだよ。それも小遣い程度の額じゃねえ。今さらどの面下げてって呆れるのは当然だろ。
なんだと？
This time, Kitani couldn't conceal his shock.
ところがよ、見たところこの店の客入りも上々じゃねえか。この様子ならのんきに隠居して暮らす分には何の不自由もねえだろうがよ。
It was legitimately
一体
good.
なんだっておやっさんは金策に血眼になってんだ。
He took one look at Kitani's stunned expression and scoffed.
その様子だとあんたも寝耳に水って感じか。なあ、困るぜ。老いぼれの面倒見るのはあんたの役目だろ。財布の紐ぐらいはきちんと掴んでおいてくれねえと。
Ignoring Aoshima's jabs, Kitani desperately dug through his memories. Why would Konohito suddenly need a large sum of money?
親父はなんて言ってる？
それが聞き出せりゃ苦労しねえよ。おやっさん相変わらずの支離滅裂な口調でな。やれ前夜のためだとかおじいひがどうとかまるっきり要領を得やしねえ。だがな、なんとなく察しはついてるよ。あの口ぶりからするとおやっさん誰かにゆすられてるんじゃねえかな。
Blackmail? Fear and anger simmered in his chest. He hadn't the slightest idea who could it be. In Konohito's present state, anyone could have tricked him. On top of that, there was a far more pressing concern. Konohito was supposed to be cooped up at home. When and where could he have encountered the culprit?
やれやれ。たった一人残った子分に何の相談もなしとはねえ。北によ、あんた全然信用されてないんじゃねえの？
Kitani couldn't argue. If anything, he blamed himself for failing to notice what was going on.
ま、いくら隠居とはいえ、あんまりみっともねえ様をさらされるとなるとな、組としても示しがつかねえわけよ。元組長ともあろうものがどこぞのアホにたかられてるとあっちゃな。
親父からは俺が直接話して事情を聞き出す。
ぬるいんだよ。
Aoshima cut in, his tone harsh.
おやっさんはよ、今日まであんたに何の相談もなかったんだろ。今さら素直に白状するぐらいなら鼻から喋ってるに決まってんだろうが。
Kitani fell silent. Aoshima pulled two round objects from his shirt pocket and set them on the table between them.
見りゃわかるだろうが、盗聴器だ。こっちが電話用。もう一つは服に仕込んどけ。おやっさんがどこの誰と会って話をしてるのか、こいつを使って探り出せよ。どうせ今のおやっさんなら気づきゃしねえさ。真っ向から問いただすより、よっぽど手っ取り早い。
Truly, it was a method befitting the Yakuza. In the past, it would have been Kitani's go-to option. But to use such a trick against someone he considered family, he couldn't help but hesitate.
気が進まねえってことなら別にいいんだぜ。当然ながら違法だしな。仇の衆には荷が重すぎる。あんたにできねえって言うなら俺たちが動くまでのことだ。
Aoshima seemed to see right through him, down to every last detail of his inner turmoil. To the Okinaga Gumi, Konehito's antics were a disgrace. There would be no sympathy from them. They would do whatever it took to solve the issue, no matter what might happen to Konehito as a result. All Katani wanted was for Konehito and Zenya to have some peace. No matter what, he couldn't let the Okinaga Gumi take matters into their own hands.
今日はまあ昔のよしみで断りを入れに来たけどよ。次にまたおやっさんが金の話をしてきたら、その時は俺らの流儀でケリをつけさせてもらうからな。
Crushing his half-finished cigarette in the ashtray, Aoshima rose from his seat, a nasty smile on his face.
そうなる前に肩がつくといいな。お互いのためによ。
With that, he walked off laughing. After he was gone, Kitani looked at the table. The bugs were still there, mocking him. He stared at them for a while, then drained the rest of his glass. Something told him this was one sorrow that couldn't be drowned in booze.
Oyaji, こんな時間にどこへ？いや、ちょっと散歩にな。気分転換だ。たまには外を出歩けといつもうるさく言ってるのは北にお前だろう。ええ。どうぞお気をつけて。ああ。
Katani bowed his head, concealing his expression, and watched Konehito leave. None of this came as a surprise. He knew Konehito had been planning to leave the house around this time, and he knew where Konehito was going. Last night, Katani had eavesdropped on a call Konehito had received. The caller had identified himself as Kamiya, but Konehito didn't have any friends by that name, as far as Katani was aware. Nevertheless, Katani had passed the phone to Konehito anyway. The bug would record everything that was said, and after the encounter with Aoshima, he needed to know what was going on. The moment Konehito had taken the phone, the man named Kamiya had grown more curt. He stated a location and time, then quickly hung up. Clearly no ordinary rendezvous. Konehito had been so panicked, Katani couldn't help but feel bad for him. There was only one possible explanation. This Kamiya guy was blackmailing Konehito. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Though it pained him, Kitani had inserted the other bug into Konehito's shoe that night. It was smaller than the phone tap and had no onboard memory. In order to eavesdrop, Kitani would need to stay within range of its signal. As soon as Konehito left the house, Kitani hopped in the car. Kamiya had set their rendezvous at a karaoke place in the city, the perfect place to ensure their conversation wouldn't be overheard. As he recalled, there was a fast food joint on that same block. He decided to position himself there. Kitani parked the car in the nearest lot and walked into the restaurant. He ordered an iced coffee, then sat down at a table near the register on the first floor. Then, carefully to act natural, he slid the earpiece into his ear. The first thing he heard was footsteps. With the bug positioned in Konehito's shoe, every step grated obnoxiously on his eardrum. Fortunately, the signal was strong. He could hear muffled music in the background as Konehito walked into the building and down the hall. Then, all at once, it fell silent. He must have entered one of the private karaoke rooms. The next thing Kitani heard was a civil yet authoritative voice, the same voice from the phone call.
わざわざこんな場所にご足労願い、申し訳ありません。いや、そんな、めっそうもない。今日お呼び出ししたのは他でもありません。ここ最近の善也君の素行について、ぜひご相談させていただきたいと思ったからです。ああ、お慈悲を、どうかお慈悲を。教団へのお布施は、これまでの倍額を納めさせていただきますから、ですからどうか、善也には寛大な処置を。
Okay, so Silent Hill vibes happening real strong today.
あなたはいつまで経っても理解してくれないようだ。我々は金銭目的で運営しているそこらの団体とは違うのです。本来あるべき姿をねじ曲げようとする不要な力こそ悪であり、我々は自然の摂理に従うまでだ。我々は見守る役目を担っているのです。だからもはや金銭の問題ではない。いいですか。今善也君が干渉しているのは極めて希少なメスの資質を持つ宿主です。
This got really weird in the saying something. What on earth are they talking about?
種肉を産み落とすほどに内なる存在と適合した宿主は久しく現れていなかった。まさに新たな純正を生み出しうる存在なのです。
Japanese have a thing with cults and weird things.
だから彼はより完璧なオスと交わることが望ましい。それが本来あるべき姿なのです。なのに善也君はそれを妨害しようとしています。
しかし善也にもオスとなり得るだけの素質が。
善也君は完璧なオスですか。
Kamiya cut Kunihito off, his voice so frigid it sent chill down Kitani's spine.
あなたも重々承知しているはずですよ、国人さん。メスに純正をはらませることができるのは完璧なオスだけだ。
So a lot of people didn't want to pay
その望み
attention.
がありますか。
Stop it. A lot of people didn't want to pay attention to this game because it's just a yaoi. This game went in Silent Hill territory. I don't care. We're getting some New World cult, but I didn't actually know. This was suggested to me and said this was right up my alley. Woo, dug it. I think they were right.
いいえ、善也はオスとしては出来損ないだ。
I feel like that's not something a man wants to hear. Kunihito's voice was feeble. It made Kitani's heart ache. What gave this Kamiya the right to torment him like this? He could feel anger welling up inside him. But right now, his only option was to keep listening.
なぜなのです。なぜ善也があんな苦しみを。こんなはずではなかったのに。
これは善也君にとっての試練であり、国人さん、あなたにとっての罰なのです。純正を守り祀っていく沖永の一族に生まれながら、あなたはこともあろうに神を礼拝して彼らをないがしろにした。その因果が子に報い、善也君の試練となったのです。
私には分からなかった。あの方々の存在が。頭を打たれて初めて見えるようになったのです。感じられるようになったのです。あの方々の姿が。
生死の境をさまよったことで、あなたは真実に目覚めることができた。その頭の傷はまさに聖痕と言えるでしょう。だからこそ我々もあなたの叔父上に引き続きご生体の管理をあなたにお任せしているのです。
ですが、なぜ新しい純正が必要なのですか。我々にはすでに御主様があらせられるというのに。そうだ、思い出した。私はお告げを受けたのです。いつかメスが生まれいでた時、御主様に生贄として捧げれば、ありし日の御姿を取り戻すと、再び我らを導いてくださると。そうすれば善也も。
なるほど。 私としたことが、その発想はありませんでした。
Kamiya sounded genuinely surprised.
確かに沖永家の御主様はかつて最高の純正だったと言われていますが、今さらたった一人のメスの生贄で元の完全な姿を取り戻すとは考えにくい。やはり万全を期すならば、我らは新たな純正の誕生に期待を託すべきなのです。そうすれば我ら自由なる民にも祝福がもたらされる。きっと前夜君の救済も叶うはずです。もちろん油断はできません。今のオスとメスがうまく成立しなければ全て無駄に終わる可能性もありますからね。メスを生贄として今の御主様の復活にかけるのは、そうなってからでも遅くはない。いいですか、国人さん。くれぐれも軽率な行動は慎むように。結果だけを急ぐと全てが台無しになるかもしれません。前夜君の監督をあなたに一任しているのは、あくまで我々の恩情であることをわきまえてください。もしあなた一人で前夜君を制御しきれないというのなら。もちろんです。前夜にはくれぐれもよく言って聞かせます。決して皆様の怒りに触れるような真似はさせません。ですからどうかご理解いただければそれでいいのです。では今日のところはこれで。
The conversation was over. Konihito left first, his unsteady footsteps muffled by the din of the hallway. Kitani would have liked to stay and find out more about this Kamiya character, but he needed to get home before Konihito. Kamiya would have to wait. As he hurried out of the fast food joint, Kitani reflected on the conversation he had just overheard. Very little of it made any sense. However, there was one thing he understood. Whatever Konihito's delusions were, this Kamiya person shared them. He certainly sounded like a true believer. Could this mean Konihito wasn't crazy? Still, the contribution Konihito had mentioned nagged at him. Had Konihito joined some kind of cult? Another point of concern was the fact that Kamiya declined the offer of money. If Kamiya hadn't demanded payment, then Konihito must have gone to the Okinaga Gumi on his own by volition. There was also the way they had spoken about Zenya. Fortunately, it didn't sound like they were planning to involve him. If anything, he got a sense they wanted him to stay out of their affairs altogether. In which case, the boy was in no immediate danger. In any case, this hopefully meant that Konihito would be pushing his luck with Aoshima and the gang any further. That was one less thing for Kitani to worry about. And yet, the shadow of unease never lifted from his chest. If this had been a more straightforward sort of blackmail, well, there were ways to deal with that, but this? The Liberated? Was that the name of their cult? He never imagined that there might be other people in the world who actually subscribed to Konihito's insane beliefs. Sure, he could hunt this Kamiya down and put the screws to him, but it wouldn't fix the problem. He would have to convince Konihito to cut ties with them altogether, or else the old man would keep worshipping that bizarre statue forever. This was one situation that couldn't be resolved with brute strength alone. For Kitani, it was just another reminder of how useless he truly was. Things are getting really, really weird now. But that's where we're going to leave it, guys. I hope you guys are enjoying these turn of events as much as I am. This game is definitely not what it seemed at first. So guys, I'll see you next time. Bye everybody.